On December 8, 1994, Iraq's Bucca prison released a man named Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The U.S. Department of Defense, after just 10 months of detainment, deemed him a low-risk individual and let him go. But at the time, the U.S. never imagined that this underestimated man would later become the face of global terrorism. After being released, al-Baghdadi quickly resumed his activities and before long became the leader of the terrorist group Islamic State of Iraq, ISI. From then on, he committed numerous bloody crimes in the name of religion that shocked the world. Whether man or woman, old or young, Muslim or non-believer, native or foreigner, no one escaped the massacre. He exploited religious fanaticism to seize power, and in a short time controlled 40% of Iraq's territory, later expanding into Syria, renaming the organization to the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIS, occupying 1/3 of Syria, and establishing a base in Raqqa to rule. He declared himself the Caliph, claiming to be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. Al-Baghdadi's self-proclaimed messianic role dragged hundreds of thousands of lives into hell. He used ISIS to launch terrorist attacks in various countries, causing massacres, slaughtering anyone who opposed his jihadist ideology. To spread global extremism, he declared the Yazidis heretics and carried out indiscriminate persecution. While planning large-scale terrorist operations, al-Baghdadi led ISIS in raiding hundreds of banks, seizing oil fields across the Middle East and Gulf region, and profiting enormously through kidnappings, extortion, and brutal tactics, making ISIS the richest terrorist organization in the world. Later, to protect its dominance in the Middle East, the U.S. was forced to offer a $25 million reward for his capture. On July 28, 1971, al-Baghdadi was born in Samarra, Iraq, with the birth name Ibrahim Awad Ibrahim al-Badri. His father was a religious scholar, and his family belonged to the Sunni al-Badri tribe. After completing his primary education in Samarra, he moved to Baghdad for further studies. Though an average student overall, he was good at math, scoring 98 on a 9th grade math exam. Al-Baghdadi once dreamed of joining the Iraqi military, but political barriers prevented it. Growing up in a religious environment, he studied Islamic studies at Baghdad's Islamic University, earning both bachelor's and master's degrees. As a student, al-Baghdadi lived in the home of a Sunni scholar, memorized chapters of the Quran, enjoyed teaching scripture to others, and encouraged adherence to Islamic law, which led his family to view him as a devout believer. During this time, he gradually embraced Salafi ideology, often growing angry when others failed to follow religious practices properly. Though quiet by nature, he became animated when speaking about religion, often engaging in heated debates in public. On March 20, 2003, the U.S. launched the Iraq War under the pretext that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction and was aiding al-Qaeda. On December 13 that same year, Saddam Hussein was captured and executed on December 30, 2006. After Saddam's regime collapsed, the U.S. quickly installed a puppet government in Iraq. Since al-Baghdadi's uncle worked in Iraqi security and his brother was an army officer, he harbored deep resentment toward the U.S. occupation, unable to understand why his homeland was invaded. Following the invasion, local militant groups emerged across Iraq. Al-Baghdadi and his associates formed the Islamic Army, launching several attacks on U.S. military convoys. He served as the group's head of religious law, and thanks to his oratory skills, he attracted dozens of young recruits. In early 2004, al-Baghdadi was captured by U.S. forces in Fallujah near Baghdad, and detained at Camp Bucca in southern Iraq. In prison, he stood out from other inmates, never causing trouble, always quietly praying, even leading others in prayer and teaching Islamic doctrine. As a result, U.S. forces considered him low risk, holding him for just 10 months before releasing him. At the time, they thought they were releasing a misguided youth, never expecting he'd later become a symbol of terrorism and a major global threat. After his release, al-Baghdadi connected with al-Qaeda's branch in Iraq, AQI. This group was led at the time by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who orchestrated suicide bombings in the name of jihad, targeting U.S. troops in Iraq and pro-U.S. forces. Under Zarqawi's leadership, AQI grew rapidly. In 2006, to expand their network, they joined with several other groups to form the Mujahideen Shura Council. Al-Baghdadi was so impressed by AQI's activities that he brought his own group into the council. AQI attacked U.S. forces while also inciting Sunni-Shia conflict, attempting to overthrow the U.S.-backed Iraqi government. Zarqawi became a major threat to the US military. In June 2006, the US launched a large-scale airstrike on his base, and Zarqawi was killed in the bombing. AQI was then taken over by Abu Umar al-Baghdadi and Abu Ayyub al-Masri, and the organization was renamed the Islamic State of Iraq, ISI. Al-Baghdadi took charge of the legal committee, directing the group's religious ideology. He worked to unite major jihadist groups in Iraq, organized large conferences, and recruited young people into ISIS. Gradually, his status rose, and he joined the Shura Council, taking on the responsibility of expanding the group. For years, he used words as his network, mesmerizing thousands, continuously expanding ISIS, climbing the ranks, with followers blindly obeying him. In 2010, the US launched massive assaults to contain ISIS. Many ISIS bases were destroyed, and leaders Abu Umar al-Baghdadi and Deputy Abu Ayyub al-Masri were eliminated. The group stood on the brink of collapse. Al-Baghdadi was chosen as the new leader, and he moved quickly to rebuild ISIS, recruiting former army and intelligence officers from Saddam Hussein's regime. Many of them had been imprisoned with him at Camp Bucca and had witnessed his calm demeanor behind bars. As a result, they gave him their full support. Baghdadi used their skills and tactical knowledge, and from March to April 2011, launched 23 attacks in southern Baghdad, causing major chaos and re-establishing ISIS's presence in the world of terrorism. On May 2, 2011, the US military killed al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Baghdadi idolized bin Laden and was furious over his death, vowing revenge. Just 3 days later, ISIS launched a massive attack in Hilla, Iraq, killing 24 police officers and injuring many others. Shortly afterward, ISIS announced plans to carry out 100 attacks across Iraq. In Mosul, they launched a series of suicide bombings, with explosions echoing through Baghdad's streets from ISIS-planted bombs. A suicide bombing at the al-Qura mosque killed 39 people, including prominent Sunni cleric Khalid al-Fadawi. Within a year, the terrorist shadow cast by Baghdadi rendered the Iraqi government helpless, and US forces began to withdraw. By December 2011, US troops had fully withdrawn. Baghdadi grew more arrogant, launching attacks freely without restraint. From villages to cities, civilians, government officials, police, and the military all became targets as he rapidly expanded his influence across Iraq. ISIS's brutal assaults became a major headache for the US, prompting a $10 million bounty for information on Baghdadi. As ISIS ravaged Iraq, civil war erupted in neighboring Syria in 2011, escalating rapidly. On one hand, the Syrian army used extreme violence to defend the regime, while on the other, local rebel forces targeted the government, and major powers like the US, Russia, and Iran intervened for their own interests. Al-Qaeda seized the opportunity to join the war in Syria, seeking to claim territory. Al-Qaeda leaders invited ISIS to participate, and Baghdadi saw this as a chance to expand. He sent his confidant Abu Muhammad al-Julani along with thousands of fighters into Syria, where they established the al-Nusra Front, with full support from Al-Qaeda. This group fought the Assad government and gradually gained ground in Syria, taking control of certain regions. As the al-Nusra Front grew closer to Al-Qaeda, Baghdadi became worried. He tried to force al-Nusra to merge with ISIS, declaring it a branch of ISIS. To facilitate action in both countries, he renamed the group the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, ISIS. This move was strongly opposed by al-Nusra's founder, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, and al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri. Al-Qaeda rejected the merger, even publicly severing ties with ISIS. The rift between the two deepened, and they became mortal enemies. Baghdadi ordered ISIS to act immediately, seizing territories controlled by al-Nusra to assert his dominance in Syria's jihadist landscape. In 2013, after fierce battles, anti-government rebel forces in Syria managed to take control of the northern city of Raqqa. However, ISIS suddenly launched a brutal assault, carrying out bloody massacres over the span of several weeks. Without discriminating between young or old, male or female, thousands of innocent civilians were slaughtered. Local rebel groups were forced to retreat. By January 2014, Raqqa had completely fallen into ISIS hands. ISIS then implemented Sharia law, established administrative offices, and declared Raqqa the capital of its caliphate. At the same time, ISIS aggressively expanded in Iraq. After capturing several villages, they launched an offensive on the country's second-largest city, Mosul. The ISIS attack was so fierce that the Iraqi army abandoned the city in just 5 days. On June 10, 2014, Mosul was fully taken by ISIS. Hundreds of thousands of civilians fled in fear. Those who refused to submit to ISIS were executed. Just like in Raqqa, Islamic law was imposed in Mosul, and countless lives were placed in the hands of al-Baghdadi. When the army pulled out, billions of dollars in military assets fell into ISIS's control. Previously, al-Baghdadi had avoided appearing in public, but realizing he now ruled vast areas and held dominion over hundreds of thousands of people, he decided to make his first public appearance. He chose the famous Al-Nuri Mosque in Mosul for his debut, surrounded by armed guards to ensure his safety. To prevent information leaks, all networks and communications around the mosque were cut off. Thousands gathered at the mosque to hear his speech, which was recorded and spread worldwide. In the speech, al-Baghdadi claimed descent from the Quraysh tribe, the same lineage as the Prophet Muhammad, and declared the establishment of the Islamic Caliphate, proclaiming himself the religious and political leader of the entire Muslim world. Although most Islamic scholars rejected this declaration, aside from ISIS's military force, thousands of individuals still pledged allegiance to the Caliphate. ISIS didn't just seize territory. It governed like a real state, enforcing a brutal justice system, collecting taxes, and providing limited public services. After setting up a reign of terror in Iraq and Syria, al-Baghdadi began expanding ISIS's influence globally, using social media and international platforms to spread propaganda videos. Not just in the Middle East, ISIS attracted extremists from Asia, Europe, and Africa. Thousands of foreign fighters joined ISIS, and terrorist groups like Khorasan Province in Afghanistan and Boko Haram in Africa pledged allegiance and joined its global expansion plans. To sustain such a large terrorist organization, al-Baghdadi relied on oil smuggling, robbing banks, and kidnapping for ransom to amass massive wealth. ISIS seized oil fields in Iraq and Syria, selling crude oil on the black market, raking in $1 to $2 million per day. They even raided Mosul's central bank, stealing $400 million, and kidnapped journalists, non-governmental organization staff, diplomats, and local elites for ransom. Those who didn't pay were tortured and killed, with execution videos released as warnings. ISIS also produced narcotics and smuggled marijuana into European and Asian markets for profit. In addition, wealthy extremists from Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia provided financial support for ISIS. In just a few short years, ISIS amassed vast wealth from many sources, becoming the richest terrorist organization in the world. Obsessed with power, al-Baghdadi allowed ISIS to carry out attacks everywhere, and his fighters became beasts who took pleasure in torture, especially brutal toward the Yazidi community. The Yazidis, a minority group in Iraq, were seen by ISIS as heretics due to their different religious beliefs. Thousands of Yazidi men and boys were captured and forced to convert to Islam. Those who refused were executed. Over 5,000 were killed. Yazidi women and girls suffered even worse. They were kidnapped and turned into sex slaves, then sold in human trafficking markets like commodities. Over 6,000 women and girls were taken, living in conditions worse than prison. Around 400,000 Yazidis fled to Kurdish regions in fear. Tens of thousands took refuge on Mount Sinjar. Though they escaped ISIS, thousands starved to death there. ISIS's brutality led the US to launch multiple airstrikes on their bases. Furious, al-Baghdadi began kidnapping and executing American journalists working in Iraq and Syria. In August 2014, ISIS released a video of the beheading of American journalist James Foley, titled "A Message to America," followed by the killing of American journalist Steven Sotloff, with both videos posted online as a direct challenge to the US. In 2015, ISIS captured the ancient city of Palmyra in Syria, killed leading archaeologist Khaled al-Assad, and destroyed historic sites like the Roman Columned Museum and the 2,000-year-old Temple of Baal-Shamin, using cultural destruction to spread their extremist ideology. At this point, ISIS controlled 40% of Iraq and 1/3 of Syria, extending its influence across large parts of the Middle East and North Africa, including the Arabian Peninsula, Sinai Peninsula, Tunisia, and Yemen, plunging hundreds of thousands of lives into the darkness of terrorism. ISIS then shifted its focus to attacking Western countries. On November 13, 2015, multiple ISIS terrorists launched deadly coordinated attacks at 6 locations in Paris, France. The first target was the Stade de France, where a friendly match between France and Germany was taking place, attended by French President François Hollande and 80,000 spectators. Right after the game started, 3 suicide bombers attempted to storm the stadium, but were stopped by security at the entrance. Upon inspection, it was discovered they were wearing explosive vests. All 3 detonated their bombs before they could be apprehended. Although the attack didn't succeed as IS had planned, the terrorists continued their rampage at restaurants in Paris, killing many civilians. 3 attackers then stormed the Bataclan Theater, where 1,500 people were attending a live concert by the metal band Death Eagles. They charged in, shouting, "Allahu Akbar," and opened fire with AK-47s in a frenzy. That day in Paris, 130 people were killed, and over 350 others seriously injured. In the years that followed, IS carried out attacks in Brussels, Belgium, Nice, France, Berlin, Germany, on a Russian airliner, in Turkey, at Ataturk Airport, and many other locations, becoming a global threat. Western countries realized that if IS wasn't stopped immediately, its reach would expand worldwide. Therefore, the US military launched operations across Europe to capture active IS operatives, while also launching airstrikes on IS's capital, Raqqa. The US forces coordinated with Kurdish fighters, Arab militias, and the Syrian Democratic Forces to encircle IS from all directions. They repeatedly struck IS supply lines on the Syria-Iraq border, cutting off support routes. US airstrikes killed 2 top IS commanders, Abu Muhammad al-Adnani and Abu Umar al-Shishani. The death of these leaders weakened IS's power significantly. US forces then destroyed IS checkpoints and took down numerous training camps. After weakening IS in Syria in October 2016, they launched Operation Victory, working with Iraqi security forces, Kurdish Peshmerga, and international allies to liberate Mosul from IS control. The US used drones and airstrikes to first destroy IS supply routes, and then launched major assaults on IS bases and command centers. To undermine IS's finances, the US bombed IS's bank in Mosul, burning $45 million worth of stored supplies, and initiated Operation Glowing Symphony, a large-scale cyber warfare campaign. IS tried to resist, launching suicide attacks in city streets. US forces crossed the Tigris River and within days surrounded and destroyed all IS strongholds. After liberating eastern and western Mosul, Iraqi forces advanced toward the Al-Nuri Mosque, where Baghdadi had once declared the Islamic Caliphate, now a hiding spot for many terrorists. Realizing they were trapped, the militants blew up the mosque before they could be captured, dying in the explosion. In the nearly 9-month-long operation, thousands of IS fighters were killed. The city suffered massive destruction. More than 10,000 civilians died, and hundreds of thousands were displaced. Most importantly, Mosul was finally freed from IS control. In early 2017, the Syrian Democratic Forces launched Operation Wrath of the Euphrates, surrounding Raqqa from all sides, cutting off IS's escape routes, trapping the militants inside the city. US airstrikes continued targeting IS positions. Although IS snipers hid in underground tunnels and fired back, and carried out suicide bombings, they were no match for US drones and fighter jets. After weeks of fierce battles, the Syrian Democratic Forces expelled IS from Raqqa, regaining control of the city. With the loss of these 2 major cities, IS was nearly crushed, but Baghdadi remained at large. The US increased the reward for his capture from $10 million to $25 million. After losing Mosul and Raqqa, IS retreated to remote areas in Syria. Hundreds of fighters fortified positions in Hajin and Baghuz along the Euphrates River. The US launched operations to encircle and clear these areas. IS lost 95% of its territory, and from a group that once made billions of dollars annually, they were now surviving by fishing. During this time, rumors of Baghdadi's death kept circulating, but he was still alive. Baghdadi secretly commanded his fighters via phone, while US intelligence continued the manhunt. In October 2019, the US received intel that Baghdadi was hiding in Syria's Idlib province. On the night of October 26, they launched Operation Kayla Mueller. A Delta Force unit composed of elite US soldiers flew in using 8 MH-60 Black Hawk and CH-47 Chinook helicopters from Iraq to the village of Bashir in Syria's Idlib province, surrounding Baghdadi's compound. The commandos attacked fiercely with gunfire and bombs. Baghdadi's guards fought back hard, but couldn't withstand US drones and air power. Realizing the end was near, death was only seconds away. The man responsible for thousands of innocent deaths was now in panic, trying to flee with his family into a dark tunnel, but was quickly detected by US military dogs. Knowing capture was inevitable, he detonated a suicide vest, killing himself and 3 of his children. The bloody life of Baghdadi ended there,